Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has urged the world to raise its voice for the Kashmiri women facing Indian brutalities in occupied Kashmir. In a tweet coinciding with Kashmir Women's Resistance Day, Khan said Indian forces have been committing war crimes against women in the occupied valley. The Prime Minister said Kashmiri women's suffering has multiplied after India stripped the region of its autonomy on 5th of August. Indian troops gang-raped 100 women in a siege and search operation in the Kupwara district on 23rd of February 1991. The day has been marked as Kashmiri Women's Resistance Day ever since. Occupied Kashmir has been under a complete lockdown since 5th of August, when New Delhi ended the constitutional regulations for the region. In India, hundreds of women protesting against the new Citizenship Act have blocked northeast Delhi's Jafarabad town. The Indian government has been facing countrywide demonstrations against the controversial act for the last 3 months. The women raised slogans of freedom and said they will not move from the site till the centre revokes the law. They have defied multiple efforts by the police to disperse them since last night. Meanwhile, members of a radical Hindu group have barged into houses in Maharashtra state, demanding proof of the citizenship from the residents. The extremists claim they have captured 3 illegal immigrants from Pune city and handed them over to the police. US President Donald Trump says he would sign a peace deal with the Taliban if it's eventually reached. He was speaking to reporters at the White House before leaving for India. Trump's comments came after a partial 7-day violence reduction agreement took effect in the country on Saturday. The partial truce is key to the signing of the peace deal on 29th of February in Doha. Meanwhile, Afghan officials have confirmed the truce has led to the restoration of mobile networks in Taliban-controlled areas. There have been reports of small clashes in rural areas, but no major attacks have taken place since Saturday. The Saudi-led coalition says it has launched air raids on ballistic missile and drone depots in the Houthi-controlled Yemeni capital of Sana'a. Coalition spokesman Turki al-Maliki said the strikes were in retaliation for the ballistic missiles attacks in Saudi Arabia. He said the coalition carried out the operation to destroy legitimate military targets. Maliki said Sana'a has become an assembly hub and launch pad for the Houthis' missiles. He went on to say the attacks destroyed storage, assembly and fighting sites. Earlier, coalition naval forces foiled a Houthi attack in the southern Red Sea. The coalition spokesman said they destroyed an unmanned boat loaded with explosives, which was launched from Hudaydah province. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has accused foreign media of using fears over the new coronavirus to sabotage parliamentary elections by discouraging voters. He said this negative campaign by foreign media started a few months ago and intensified close to the polls. The Supreme Leader said all Iranians should be vigilant and ready to foil such attacks. He appreciated people's participation in the elections despite all propaganda. State media said the Conservatives have made early gains as counting is underway. Earlier, Iran's health ministry said the outbreak has claimed 8 lives in the country so far. President Hassan Rouhani says Iran has never closed the door of dialogue with the EU over the 2015 nuclear deal. Meeting Dutch Foreign Minister Stef Blok in Tehran, Rouhani said the deal has major regional and global significance. The president said Washington's withdrawal from the deal was detrimental to its own people, region and the whole world. Rouhani said Iran is interested in warming and maintaining cordial relations with the European Union. Earlier, Blok met Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif and discussed bilateral, regional and international issues. Tehran's relations with the EU have been tense since the US withdrew from the JCPOA in May 2018. The Khalifa Haftar-led Libyan National Army claims it has killed 16 Turkish fighters since Ankara moved its troops into the country. The statement comes a day after Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said his country's military suffered casualties in Libya. The Turkish president didn't specify the exact number of the troops killed. Erdogan also said Turkey-backed forces neutralized 100 rival fighters in the country. Earlier, he said Ankara is fighting Haftar with teams from the Syrian National Army. This was the Turkish president's first admission of the presence of the Turkish-backed Syrian rebels fighting in Libya. On Friday, Libyan strongman Haftar vowed to fight Turkish forces if peace talks in Geneva failed. The oil-rich country has been mired in chaos since 2011. 9 people are killed in Turkey after 5.7 magnitude earthquake struck its one province near Iran border. The health ministry said 35 others are injured, out of which 8 are in critical condition. The official said over 1,000 buildings collapsed after the quake. The European Mediterranean Seismological Center said the earthquake had a depth of 5 kilometers. The US Geological Survey said epicenter of the quake was near Iranian village of Habbaj Olia, less than 10 kilometers from the Turkish border. Iranian officials said jolts were felt in the country, but there were no immediate reports of deaths. Israeli forces have shot dead a Palestinian, accusing him of placing a bomb near the Gaza border. The Gaza Health Ministry says 2 other civilians were injured by Israeli fighting as they tried to collect the body. Later, an Israeli bulldozer pulled out the body of the slain Palestinian youth. Meanwhile, Israeli occupation forces detained 7 Palestinians during raids across the occupied West Bank. This brings up the number of the arrested Palestinians to 20 during the last 2 days. The EU says Israel's plan to build residential units in East Jerusalem is illegal under international regulations. In a statement, EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell called on Israel to reconsider its plan, saying it threatens the viability of two-state solution. Borrell said such steps would cut the geographic contiguity between Jerusalem and Bethlehem and isolate Palestinian communities living in the area. He said the bloc won't recognize any unilateral changes to the pre-1967 borders. Borrell also criticized Washington's Middle East peace plan, saying it runs contrary to international law and the UN Security Council resolutions. On Friday, the EU Foreign Policy Chief met Palestine's Foreign Minister Riyad Maliki in Brussels. Borrell reaffirmed the bloc's continued commitment to a negotiated two-state solution. UN Chief Antonio Guterres has urged the Security Council to authorize a new passage point for humanitarian aid to reach northeast Syria. In a report, Guterres said the transit point should be made on the Turkish border to supply medical aid to Idlib. Guterres said from a security and logistical perspective, the Tal Abyad border crossing will be the most feasible option. The Secretary-General said 2 other passage points on the Iraqi border were studied but lacked logistical capacity. Earlier in January, Western members of the United Nations Security Council called on Guterres to provide new options. This came after the Council, under pressure from Russia, reduced the number of authorized border crossings. China's President Xi Jinping says the coronavirus epidemic is the country's largest public health emergency since its founding in 1949. Speaking in Beijing, Xi said Chinese authorities must learn from the shortcomings exposed during the response to the outbreak. The death toll in the mainland has crossed 2,400 with almost 77,000 infections. Meanwhile, Iran has confirmed 15 new cases of the new coronavirus. Speaking on the state TV, the Iranian Health Ministry spokesman said the death toll has reached 8. Following the outbreak in Iran, Tehran's neighbors have closed their borders with the country. This includes Afghanistan, Pakistan and Turkey. Iraq has also extended an entry ban for any non-Iraqis coming from Iran. Meanwhile, Jordan said it will bar citizens from China, Iran and South Korea from entering the kingdom. In Italy, the virus has killed 2 people and infected another 113. The number of confirmed coronavirus cases in South Korea jumped to 602 and the death toll rose to 5. Israeli media reports say authorities are looking to quarantine around 200 visitors from South Korea in a military base south of Jerusalem. The WHO says it was concerned about the jump in cases with no clear link to China. The US says the Russia-linked social media accounts are spreading conspiracy theories about the new coronavirus online. US Assistant Secretary of State for Europe and Eurasia, Philip Rieker, said the disinformation campaign is disrupting global efforts to fight the epidemic. Rieker said thousands of false personas are being used on social media to promote theories that the US is behind the outbreak. He He said Russia's intent is to sow discord and undermine US institutions and alliances from within. Russia's foreign ministry denied the claim, calling the accusation intentionally misleading. The claims circulating online, including allegations that the coronavirus is a US effort to wage economic war on China. They also include reports that COVID-19 is a biological weapon manufactured by the CIA. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders has earned a decisive victory in the Democratic presidential caucuses in the state of Nevada. With 43% of the ballots counted, Sanders has secured 47% of the vote, ahead of the former Vice President Joe Biden on 21%. Former Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg trailed behind at 14%, while Senators Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar posted single digits. Primaries in South Carolina will be held on 29th of February, followed by Super Tuesday on 3rd of March. Sanders claimed victory at a campaign rally in Texas, that is one of the 14 states voting for Super Tuesday.
I think all of you know we won the popular vote in Iowa. We won the New Hampshire primary. And according to 3 networks in the AP, we have now won the Nevada caucus.
It's a time for a short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. In Algeria, tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets of capital Algiers to make the first anniversary of the protests that ousted ex-President Abdulaziz Bouteflika. Scores of Algerians demanded the removal of Bouteflika's allies and more steps towards democracy. They chanted slogans against President Abdulmajid Tebboune. Police fired water cannon to disperse the demonstrators. The government has cancelled all the trains to the capital to keep the number of demonstrators down. The protesters want transparent elections and a president who represents people. Nearly 2,500 protesters have been arrested over the past year, and hundreds are still in custody waiting for the trial. 9 people, including 3 children, have died after a vehicle fell into a deep gorge in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Police said 5 others were injured in the accident in Katuha district. Officials said the driver lost control of the vehicle, which rolled down into 300 feet deep ravine. They said villagers started rescue efforts before police arrived. In Pakistan, at least 9 laborers have been killed and 7 others injured in a marble mine slide in the northern province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Rescue officials say over 30 laborers were working at a marble mine in Bamboka village of Bunaid district at the time of the accident. At least 14 others are feared trapped under the rubble. A rescue operation is underway to recover them. German police have launched an investigation into a shooting at a shisha bar in the city of Stuttgart. Yesterday, an unknown perpetrator shot at a window at the entrance to the building while the bar was empty. There were reported no injuries or casualties. The shooting happened a few days after a gunman shot dead 9 people in Hanau. Chancellor Angela Merkel condemned the killings in Hanau, calling it the poison of racism. Last week, German police also arrested 12 men accused of plotting attacks against Muslims, inspired by the Christchurch terror attack in New Zealand. Protesters in Hanau have slammed the AfD, a German far-right party, blaming it for the Hanau shooting and increased xenophobia. In Mali, 3 soldiers have been killed and 5 wounded in a militant attack on an army camp in the far north. In a tweet, the military said terrorists attacked the outpost near the southern city of Timbuktu. He said the armed forces took control of the outpost and airlifted the wounded to Savare town. A local official said 2 soldiers were missing after the attack. He said the militants took vehicles and military equipment with them. In early February, 40 people, including 9 soldiers, were killed in a spate of attacks in central Mali. In Togo, people have voted in a presidential election expected to extend Faure Gnassingbé's 15 years in office. After voting, Gnassingbé said he was pleased with the turnout. Many in the West African countries say they are fed up with the dynasty of Gnassingbé and his father Idema Gnassingbé, who seized power in 1967 coup. But the ruling family has fended off challenges, including protests that were met with deadly force in 2017. Polling stations are now closed and the vote counting has started. The election follows a constitutional revamp last year that limits presidents to 2 5-year terms. However, the reform was not retroactive, meaning the president could be in power for another decade. Climate change is taking its toll in different parts of the world, and the countries are finding ways to reduce carbon imprints. Now, Norway has come up with a solution to tackle the menace of plastic with recycling.
Every minute, 15 tons of plastic is being dumped in the world's oceans, and the situation is growing from bad to worse. Though Norwegian recycling industry is cognizant of the threats, they think the problem lies not in plastic itself, but in its usage.
I think the big discussion is, we have a problem with plastic. Is the problem the plastic itself, or is it the way that we as a consumer behave ourselves?
With a 90% recycling rate, the plastic deposit system is viewed as a key move to the country's success. Customers pay extra cents for plastic bottles and get refund after returning the empty ones. The EU member countries have been given a target to recycle 90% of plastic bottles up to 2029, but Norway is 10 years ahead of the deadline.
EU countries has to return 77% of all the bottles in 2025 and 90% in 2029. And we believe that the only way to achieve that is through deposit systems.
More than 1 billion plastic bottles and aluminum cans were returned in the country in 2018.
Everything which can be returned, I return. I collect everything and I take it to the deposit machine when my bag is full.
Norwegians think people need to work out to keep plastic out of nature.
In Mexico, climate change and water scarcity are forcing farmers to abandon traditional staples like corn in favor of more viable options. Others are giving up farming altogether, selling their fields and leaving their ancestral homelands. More in this report. Corn has been a symbol of Mexican pride for centuries and formed the backbone of the civilization that gave rise to this country. But its future is now in doubt as climate change and endless droughts transform the Mexican landscape.
We
didn't get the rain that was supposed to fall in June, July, August or September. And that's what we see now. The maize didn't grow because there was no water.
Mexico is one of the countries most vulnerable to climate change in the Americas. In Puebla State, which is known as the Mexican cradle of corn, cultivation has plummeted by 18%.
We have seen the flora and fauna has changed, and there are longer periods of drought and higher temperatures. During winter, the drops in temperature are harsher, and all that has consequences on the agricultural sector in the region.
Farmers are now turning to less water-intensive crops like pistachio or cactus. Others are selling their fields to real estate developers and looking for other ways to make a living. This phenomenon threatens the country's food supply and is likely to drive up prices of basic essentials. Dancers in elaborate costumes took to the streets of Bolivia's western Oruro town. They performed traditional songs and dances in an annual UNESCO-recognized carnival. This report has the details.
The dancers in garish outfits, masks and hats whirled through the historic mining town of Oruro. The colorful carnival has its origins in the ancient festival of Ito, celebrated by the indigenous Uro people.
I love the Tengu because it is warlike. I think you have to be a little like a warrior in life in order to keep moving forward, and this is a beautiful dance. I've danced in the Tengu Stolka for many years and I love it.
After the Spanish prohibited indigenous rituals in the 17th century, the event merged with Christianity in a celebration that remains distinctly Adian to this day. The faithful believe that the Virgin of Sucavan has protected the city since it was founded by the Spanish in 1606.
Oruro is the best carnival in the world. It was declared a masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity. This is a dance of devotion that we leave at the feet of the Virgin of Sucavan in a sign of faith.
Dancers pay tribute to the town's diversity of communities, fusing indigenous, Spanish, and African traditions.
More stories to follow right after a short break. Britain has criticized the European Union over failing to negotiate a mandate for post-Brexit trade talks. In a statement, Prime Minister Boris Johnson's office said the bloc is being indecisive because different members want different things. Johnson's office said British ministers are united in the government's approach to the negotiations. This statement comes ahead of negotiations between Britain and the EU to determine trade mandate. British ministers will meet on Tuesday to sign off the formal trade mandate document, which will frame its negotiating aims. The European Commission has already proposed a negotiating mandate which can be signed off by member states on 25th of February. Oman's leader Sultan Haitham bin Tariq al-Said says the government will work to reduce public debt and restructure public institutions. In a speech, al-Haitham said the government will create a national framework to tackle unemployment. He said the government will direct the financial resources in the best way, which will increase revenues. The Omani ruler said public sector departments will adopt efficient governance for a balanced and sustainable economy. The oil-producing country has relied heavily on loans to offset a widening deficit caused by lower crude prices. And now the weather situation from around the globe. That's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at